the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Hello, welcome to the Litcom channel, where today I will be exploring the most disturbing book I believe to be ever written, To Hell and Back, The Last Train from Hiroshima, by Charles Pellegrino. Now, as someone who has personally consumed media with disturbing themes, such as Berserk and Grave of the Fireflies, I can honestly say this is the most disturbing I have encountered, which actually gave me pause at some moments, not only due to the fact that these were real accounts of survivors of the bombings, but also the stark realism and scientific language Pellegrino uses within the book itself. For those who need a refresher, 2 nuclear bombs were dropped in the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on the 6th and 9th of August 1945, with an estimated 129,000 to 226,000 being lost to the blast. James Cameron has also expressed interest in adapting the book into a film, with him planning to release it before Avatar 4. However, the book isn't without controversy with the publisher, Henry Holt and Company, choosing to not print, correct, or ship further copies of the book due to Pellegrino's citing a fraudulent source in Joseph Fuoco, who had claimed to be a replacement flight engineer on one of the planes that escorted the Enola Gay to Hiroshima. However, the book was released under the current name in 2015, with these sections removed, and a foreword by Stephen Leeper, the first non-Japanese chairman of the Hiroshima Peace Culture Foundation, the organization that manages the Hiroshima Museum, and a teacher of Hiroshima Studies at Hiroshima Jogakuen University. Leeper describes Pellegrino's work as, and I quote, "No book I know has articulated more fully, more accurately, and more effectively the essential nature of the atomic bombings, the experience of the people, and the endless aftermath." This video is intended to function as a part analysis, part recap of certain sections of the book, as Pellegrino's prose tends to be very dense in terms of information, with the text itself covering multiple different viewpoints and characters. Due to this, I implore you to read the text for yourself. Trust me, it's worth it, as this video will hopefully serve to give a first impression of the book as a whole. Anyway, without further delay, the person whom I believe encapsulates both the disturbing and hopeful elements of the book is Takashi Nagai. Nagai was born on the 3rd of February 1908 to accomplished parents, with his father, Noburo Nagai, being a practitioner of Western medicine, making Takashi's own pursuit of medicine unsurprising, as he joined the Nagasaki Medical College in April 1928. When he was graduating in 1932, he was supposed to give an address at his graduation ceremony. However, 5 days before, he became intoxicated at a farewell party and returned home completely soaked with water from the rain. He slept without drying himself, and found the next morning that he had contracted a disease of the right ear, signs of meningitis, which made him depressed and partially deaf. He could not practice medicine and agreed to turn to radiology research. On the 9th of June 1934, Nagai received baptism in the Catholic faith. He chose the Christian name Paul and proposed to Midori, his wife. They married in August and had 4 children, a boy, Makoto, and 3 daughters, Ikuko Sasano, who died shortly after her birth, and Kayano. In January 1933, Takashi began his military service with the 11th Hiroshima Regiment. In Manchuria, Nagai cared for the wounded and served in the sanitary service as a medic. He was strongly shaken in his faith in Japanese culture when saw for himself the exactions of the Japanese soldiers and their brutality towards the Chinese civilian population. On the 7th of July 1937, the same day as the birth of his first daughter Ikuko, the war between Japan and China broke out, and he was mobilized as a surgeon in the service of the 5th Division Medical Corps. He was affected by the harsh winter in China and the distress of the civilians and soldiers, both Chinese and Japanese. On the 4th of February 1939, he received news of the death of his father and that of his daughter Ikuko. He remained in China until 1940. Upon his return, he continued his studies at the college. In June 1945, he was diagnosed with leukemia and was given a life expectancy of 3 years. This disease was probably due to his exposure to X-rays during radiological examinations, which he performed by direct observation since protective films were not available during the war period. By August, his cancer had progressed to his bone marrow, with him being estimated to only live another 6 months to 3 years. Despite this, he still cared for the patients at the hospital where he himself was a patient. Nagai perceived the bombing as an almost biblical event, believing that it was not coincidental that both the hospital and the nearby Uramaki Cathedral overlooked the place where St. Paul Miki, the samurai who became a Jesuit, was crucified with 25 of his followers in 1597, with the convergence of both Hypocenter and this site being symbolic in his opinion of the error of man's ways. Nagai's perception of the bomb as a biblical force is a belief he carries throughout the book, which often contrasts with the scientific dissection of both the bomb and its effects by Pellegrino within the book, with both scientific and biblical interpretations portraying the grandeur and significance of the bombs. Both Makoto and Kayano survived the bombing due to them both being shadow-shielded by a mountain at the time of the blast, a fate that was not shared by their mother who was killed in their home, making dinner for Nagai, despite her being urged to remain with her children as they played in the shadow-shielded area, with it being described as mixed in with her bones were cooking utensils, mashed flat, then melted. Nagai began working as part of the relief effort as an officer of the rescue committee, reflecting regretfully in his memoirs that he acted draconianly towards his staff in forcing them to continue relief efforts despite their own sicknesses. He felt guilty for this and would eventually begin blaming himself for their deaths. Nagai was initially hit with 1/5 of the radiation dosage required to kill a person after the blast, with the hospital's shielding of steel and red brick protecting him from further exposure, whereas those outside would have received 1/3 of a lethal dose. However, as the nurses sickened before Dr. Nagai's eyes, the bomb, while still causing nausea and making his skin brittle, was killing Nagai's healthy blood-producing cells and cancer cells with equal ease. This meant that miraculously, almost from the start of the first gamma-ray surge, his cancer was being driven toward remission. As an aside, the book sidetracks towards the similarly horrific struggles of Takashi Nagai's niece, Tatsu, and her experience with her aunt. To be honest, I believe Pellegrino conveys this harrowing story so starkly that I couldn't do it better myself, in which case the following is a direct quotation of how Pellegrino conveys Tatsu's experience. Even the bond between mother and child was not immune. Tatsu would neither forget nor forgive the way her little cousin Eiko died. Never again would she refer to Eiko's mother by any name except Skinny Aunt, or the old lady. The aunt, like Tatsu, had been shielded behind the shadows of Kawabira Hill and the 366-meter peak of Kompira. Unlike Tatsu, Skinny Aunt did run to the other side, anxious to find the Urakami school where she had last seen her 8-year-old girl. Somewhere beyond the flattened school, beyond the tangled mass of prison bars and the dead alligator man, she heard Eiko calling to her from one of the school's shelter tunnels. All of the other girls near the line of tunnel entrances appeared to have been simultaneously roasted and squashed like bugs. Most of them did not look human anymore, and neither did Eiko. Somehow her eyes had been shielded, but the rest of her face was a huge blister, and the whole front of her body was blackened alligator skin. My child was turned into a monster, Skinny Aunt would tell Tatsu, over and over again, trying to explain it all away, thinking that Tatsu, if no one else, would somehow understand. As Skinny Aunt told it, Eiko knew she was going to die, but she was so overjoyed to see her mother one last time that she seemed to revive. Tatsu believed that Skinny Aunt became afraid that the monster might survive. "Mother," Eiko said, "I couldn't walk any farther. I wanted to come to you. Please cover me up. I'm cold." The mother stood and said, "Wait a minute. I'll find something to make you warm. Just wait a minute. Hold on to yourself." And then she ran away, haunted from that moment and for the rest of her life by the image of little Fiko shivering alone in the dark, tormenting her forever with remembered cries of, "Mother, Mother." But Eiko was a monster, Skinny Aunt wanted to explain, and Tatsu would become all the more insulted by the woman's belief that she would understand. "The real monsters," Tatsu would one day tell Uncle Paul Nagai, "they look just like us. And perhaps the sainted ones too," she would later relate. Hours after Skinny Aunt fled, another parent searching the tunnel shelters for a missing child found Eiko still alive and kept her warm until death came to her the following morning. Eiko lived far longer than she probably should have, calling the whole time for her mother. The stranger who cared for another's child as if it were her own gave her a Catholic burial near the ruins of Urakami Cathedral and the St. Francis Hospital, making sure little Eiko's name was recorded on a stone. Returning to Nagai, the Japanese army began to bring victims to the hospital and demand the cause of their affliction be determined. When Nagai and his fellow doctors couldn't determine the cause of the disease due to lacking medical equipment, the Japanese army left, taking the majority of the food and water supplies with them from the hospital. American doctors were then sent to the hospital to inspect it, to which Nagai was instructed to receive medicine at a first aid station. The pharmacists there questioned him, and he only received a small amount of medicines and doses of vitamin B and C. Penicillin, however, was withheld, and the replenishment of the hospital's vitamin supplies took around 2 to 3 treks through the bomb's hypocenter, further exposing Dr. Nagai and the doctors to high levels of radiation. Despite this medicine, The pervasive fires and destruction did not cease, as Pellegrino would reference when writing. Within minutes, if not seconds, people were changed. As the skies darkened beneath the spreading Urakami cloud, fires became Dr. Paul Nagai's sole light source. He saw a colleague dancing and singing wildly atop the hospital's dormitory building. Half of the dorm's roof was already being swallowed by flames, and as the wall of the fire gathered strength and crept toward the man, his singing turned to loud laughter. The man clearly needed saving, but the heat was intensifying so quickly that anyone running into the dorm and trying to find the stairs would never find a way out. Neither Paul Nagai nor anyone else who saw the dancer dared advance toward the blaze. Instead, they backed away from it. They could not advance even as the young colleague, out of his mind with fear or with denial or both, danced directly into the flames. His singing and laughter became a long scream that lasted nearly 15 seconds, and Nagai backed up several more steps, quickening the pace of his retreat. "Doctor! Doctor! What shall I do?" Dr. Nagai all but backed into the woman, nearly knocking her over as she pleaded from extremis for him to treat her little boy's wounds. When Nagai turned to face the young mother, he backed away in another direction, without any words at all. "Help me!" the woman cried. She did not seem to understand that her child no longer had a head. Nagai was inspired to try and treat the newfound radiation sickness, or Disease X as described within the book, traveling with his nurses up to 20 kilometers a day, bringing cans of peaches, and the strange-sounding advice of not to wash away the maggots that were living in gangrenous wounds due to their ability to eat dead and irradiated skin cells. Nagai's team became known for a distinctive theory that shoring up the immune systems of irradiated survivors by extracting vitamins from the liver, even from rat liver, and by seeking out all known sources of vitamin C and vitamin B, gave the injured an increased likelihood of survival, giving him the newfound reputation as an elusive witch doctor within the irradiated wasteland. Dr. Nagai would later collapse from exhaustion and would be cared for at the hospital. After being confined to bed for a month, Nagai began building a house for himself, as Pellegrino describes, from sheet metal debris and pieces of scrap wood hauled down from the demolished medical center. Nagai built himself a hut, 600 meters from the hypocenter, in the footprint of his home's foundations. The single-room structure was located only steps away from the very patch of earth on which he found his wife's rosary with its glass beads melted. He did this in order to use himself as a lab rat for the effects of radiation upon the human body, with the intent of allowing the effects of radiation on his body to be examined after his death. Nagai named the building Nyokodo, Nyokodo to, literally, as yourself hall, after Jesus' words, "Love your neighbor as yourself." Nagai would eventually die on May 1, 1951 due to his cancer. His liver weighed over 3 times the normal weight, making his survival remarkable, with scientists concluding that his blood had become all but non-functional years prior. Nagai's story of faith, resilience, and humanity, which Pellegrino beautifully depicts, is only one of the stories portrayed within the book, so please be sure to read the book itself. I promise you won't regret it. Anyway, that's the end of this video. Please subscribe and comment your own thoughts on the book, or if there is anything you think I should cover in the future. Litcom, signing off.